She boarded the flight like any other professional first-class ticket in hand, a quiet confidence in her step, and years of hard-earned success behind her. But what happens when a black woman CEO, poised and powerful, is told to give up her seat, not because of a mix-up, but because a white man insists he belongs there more? What would you do if the world demanded your silence for the sake of someone else's comfort? How would you respond if your dignity was reduced to a debate at 30,000 feet? This is not just a story about race or power. It's a story about presence, about refusing to shrink, about what happens when one woman stays seated, and the whole system is forced to rise. In just 5 minutes, one calm decision ignited a global conversation. But the real question is, why did it take so long? If you believe in dignity, justice, and the quiet power of standing your ground, then this story will stay with you long after the seatbelt signs go off. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Let's take off into the full story together. Naomi Ellison wasn't expecting anything extraordinary that morning. Just another flight, another aisle seat, another keynote speech at a conference full of men in gray suits who still hesitated before shaking her hand. She arrived at LAX an hour earlier than necessary, her leather briefcase in one hand, a tall oat milk latte in the other. Her forest green pantsuit fit perfectly tailored, elegant, understated. She moved with quiet precision, like a woman who had rehearsed calm so often it had become instinct. Gate B-17 was crowded, buzzing with Monday morning energy. Tech consultants, healthcare executives, engineers all headed to the Seattle Biomedical Innovation Summit. Naomi had spoken at the summit before, but this year was different. She was the opening keynote. The room would be filled with faces from across the country, and eyes watching closely how a black woman opened a stage that had never been opened by one before. She didn't think about that, though not now. Flight 3481 to Seattle is now boarding all first-class passengers, the agent called cheerfully. Naomi stood, gathered her things, and approached the gate. As she scanned her ticket, the agent gave her a quick smile. One of those, "Oh wow, you're somebody" smiles that came once in a while. She gave a quiet nod in return. Inside the jet bridge, her steps slowed. Something about the transition from terminal to plane always made her pause. It was a feeling she couldn't explain, as if the pressure changed, as if the air reminded her that any space could change depending on who was allowed to feel safe inside them. "Welcome aboard," the flight attendant said, voice rehearsed but warm. Naomi walked into the cool hush of the first-class cabin. Leather seats and shades of navy lined either side of the aisle. A few passengers had already settled in. A man with a tablet, a woman reading a hardcover book, a couple whispering in hushed tones. Seat 3A, window side, forward section. She reached the row and stopped. There, in her seat, sat a man, white, early to mid-40s, navy blazer, slightly wrinkled. Blonde hair slicked back in a style that tried too hard. Legs casually crossed, one polished shoe resting on his knee. A tumbler of what looked like bourbon balanced delicately in his left hand. He didn't glance up. Naomi checked her boarding pass again out of instinct. 3A. No mistake. She waited for him to acknowledge her. He didn't. She cleared her throat politely. "Excuse me," she said, her voice low, measured and warm. "I believe you may be in my seat." That was when he looked up. His eyes dragged up her body, not with interest but calculation. A moment of pause, then the faintest smirk. His head tilted slightly. "Coach is behind you," he said flatly. He didn't say it loudly. He didn't need to. Naomi blinked once. Her heart gave a tiny skip. Not surprise. Exactly. Just that quiet tightening in the chest she hadn't felt in years but knew well. The ache of having her presence questioned in spaces she had earned her way into. Her voice didn't change. "This is 3A, correct?" She held up her ticket. Her hand was steady. He didn't even look at it. "I sit here every week," he said, now taking a long sip of his drink. "You must be new." Naomi didn't reply. She glanced to her left. The aisle was starting to fill. The hum of overhead compartments, the occasional beep of luggage wheels rolling across carpet. Everyone was too busy to notice, or pretending not to. She turned her gaze back to the man. "I have a confirmed seat assignment," she said simply, "and I'd like to sit down now." He waved a hand, as if brushing away an annoying insect. "Take any of the empty ones in the back," he muttered. Behind her, a passenger shifted awkwardly. The flight attendant at the front, young Asian American, in her early 20s, caught Naomi's eyes for a brief second before quickly looking away. Naomi inhaled, held it, let it go. She'd been here before. Not on a plane, maybe, but in boardrooms, on panels, at investor meetings, situations where she was expected to shrink or sidestep the moment so others could stay comfortable in their entitlement. She wasn't going to escalate. She wasn't going to snap. But she also wasn't going to move. Not today. She slipped her phone from the outer pocket of her briefcase, tapped twice, called Jasmine. "Morning," came her assistant's bright voice. "Hey," Naomi said softly. "I'm on Blue Haven 3481 first class. Someone's in my seat and refusing to move." There was a pause. "I'll handle it," Jasmine said quickly. Naomi ended the call. When she looked up, she could feel it, the ripple, the subtle awareness spreading across the cabin like static. The man still sat there, smug. "I don't know what you think you're doing," he said finally, "but no one's going to make me move." Naomi didn't answer. She just stood still, spine straight, eyes forward. She wasn't leaving that spot. Not for anyone. Not anymore. Naomi stood quietly beside seat 3A, her figure still and composed as if rooted to the floor. The man occupying her seat, Chadwick Stone, had now turned slightly away, taking another sip from his drink, making no effort to correct the situation. He acted as though she had simply ceased to exist. The silence grew thick. Passengers continued boarding, brushing past her down the narrow aisle, offering brief, awkward glances. Some took the window to the scene in passing and quickly looked away. Others registered it and gave subtle, concerned glances, but no one intervened. Naomi felt the weight of it settle in her chest. The weight of being looked at without being seen. It was a familiar sensation, cold and steady, one she had filed away years ago beneath layers of discipline and strength. But it had never gone away entirely. It just waited. Her mind flicked briefly to her itinerary. Conference prep at the Grand Seattle Hotel. Her notes, carefully printed and organized, rested in her briefcase. 1,000 moving parts she had spent months managing, all hinging on this trip. But now, she was here blocked, disrespected, and being treated as if she had no place in the seat she had rightfully purchased. From the front of the cabin, the young flight attendant returned. Her name tag read Mia Tran. She had clearly debated with herself whether to step in. Now, she approached carefully, trying to remain professional while visibly uneasy. "Ma'am," Mia said, voice tentative. "Is everything all right?" Naomi turned to her. "Calm as still water. Yes, except I'm unable to sit in the seat I paid for." Mia's gaze darted to Chadwick. "Sir, may I see your boarding pass?" she asked gently. Chadwick didn't even turn. I already told her. I sit here every Monday morning. That seat's mine. Mia hesitated. Naomi could see her struggling, caught between a passenger's arrogance and the quiet moral calculus of who was easier to disappoint. Please, Naomi said softly. I'd appreciate it if you would confirm the manifest. Her voice was not sharp, but there was something in it of firmness, a clarity that brought Mia to attention. I will. Mia nodded and stepped away. Chadwick let out a low laugh, shaking his head. People like you always make things complicated, he muttered, still facing away. Naomi's eyes didn't blink. Her jaw remained relaxed, but her hands now at her sides curled slightly. Not into fists, just enough to hold something in. She wanted to say something. She wanted to burn the moment down with the fire it deserved. But that wasn't how she operated. Not anymore. Her mind drifted to a dinner 10 years ago, a biotech boardroom in Dingxi, where she'd been mistaken for catering staff. The man who made the comment had smiled afterward, as if it was all harmless. No one had corrected him. She had smiled too. She'd laughed politely. And then she'd closed a multi-million-dollar deal 2 hours later, without ever acknowledging the insult. Naomi hadn't smiled for nothing. She'd done it because she'd needed the room, the opportunity, the door to stay open. But this time, she wasn't smiling. This time, she wasn't bargaining for space. This was her space. Mia returned with a tablet in hand, cheeks flushed. Miss Ellison, she said carefully, you are confirmed for seat 3A. Naomi gave a slight nod. Thank you. Chadwick finally turned to face them both. Eyes narrowed. There's clearly a system error, he said. I don't care what your little screen says. I sit in this seat every time. I have platinum emerald status. You think I'm moving for this? The word this hung in the air, like poison. Naomi didn't flinch. She simply said, That's not how this works. Chadwick sneered. Why don't you take that empty seat back there? Would that really be so hard? Mia looked mortified, glancing between them helplessly. Naomi inhaled through her nose, exhaled slowly. Her voice was steady. No, it would not be hard, but it would be wrong. Passengers in nearby rows shifted uncomfortably. One man behind them reached into his pocket and subtly angled his phone, the camera lens facing forward. Naomi caught the movement in her periphery but didn't react. Chadwick leaned back, tossing his arms along the top of the seat like he owned it. I'll speak to the captain, he said. Let's see if he wants to explain to the FAA why he inconvenienced a top-tier passenger over a misunderstanding. Naomi knew exactly what that meant. He wasn't just doubling down. He was weaponizing the very systems that had always served people like him. Status, threats, the old boy's hierarchy, the assumption that he was more valuable, and all of it designed to wear her down just enough to step aside. She didn't. Instead, she opened her briefcase and pulled out a folded letterhead document, her keynote speech, the one she had spent weeks refining. She scanned it as if she had all the time in the world. Mia stood awkwardly beside them, unsure whether to press further. I'll let the captain know, she mumbled, then retreated down the aisle. Naomi continued reading. Chadwick scoffed. You think this is about race, he said suddenly. Louder now. Naomi looked up, her eyes resting on him with a calm that made his voice sound even smaller. I don't need to think, she said evenly. I know exactly what it's about. Chadwick rolled his eyes. Unbelievable. Behind them, the cabin had grown noticeably quieter. The boarding process was almost complete. The murmurs had turned to silence. Naomi could feel the eyes on her now. Not just glances, full attention. She wasn't invisible anymore, not in the way she was used to. Now she was visible in a way she hated. The center of a moment she didn't choose. A social experiment in real time. A black woman standing for her right to exist in a space that someone else had claimed by habit, not by right. She wished she could disappear, but she stood firm. Her mind wrestled with two voices, one ancient and weary, the other fierce and new. One said, "It's not worth it. Let it go. Move to another seat." "Avoid the scene," the other whispered. "How many times have you let it go before?" What changed? Naomi swallowed. She knew the answer. Nothing ever changed unless someone refused to move. Mia returned, eyes uncertain. Behind her came a tall man in a Blue Haven air captain's uniform, neatly pressed, late 50s, sharp jaw, graying temples. "Captain Moore," Mia said quietly. The captain stopped in the aisle and glanced between Naomi and Chadwick. His voice was calm, professional. "I understand there's a seating issue," he said. Naomi said nothing. Chadwick was quick to jump in. "Yes. I sit here every week. I don't know what kind of system glitch you have, but I'm not moving because some lady thinks she deserves my seat." Naomi's stomach turned slightly. She didn't wince. She didn't speak. The captain raised an eyebrow, then turned to Mia. "May I see the manifest?" She handed it over. The silence was so still. It rang in Naomi's ears like pressure from altitude. After a moment, Captain Moore looked up from the tablet. "Ms. Naomi Ellison," he said clearly, "is assigned seat 3A. Then he turned to Chadwick. "I'll need to see your boarding pass, sir." "Sir?" Chadwick leaned back, eyes hardening. "Unbelievable," he muttered again, and then he said nothing more. The captain's confirmation hung in the air like a struck bell, echoing into the silence that had overtaken the first-class cabin. Seat 3A belonged to Naomi Ellison. It had always belonged to her. Every person within earshot knew it now. But still, no one moved. Chadwick Stone sat stone-faced, his arms now folded tightly across his chest. The casual arrogance he had worn like a designer suit had begun to wrinkle. He was trying to measure the room, trying to decide if he could still win. Naomi stood quietly beside him, back straight, face composed. She wasn't breathing any faster, though her chest felt tight. Her heart wasn't racing, but her fingers tingled. The adrenaline was there, hiding behind the calm. She felt like a glass filled to the brim, not spilling, but full enough to shatter if tipped just once. Captain Moore offered Chadwick one more look. No threat, just procedure. "I'll need to see your boarding pass, sir," he repeated. Chadwick didn't move. Instead, he stared at Naomi as if she'd stolen something from him. "I left it in my jacket," he muttered. "Which jacket would that be?" the captain asked. Chadwick gestured vaguely toward the overhead bin above row 4. Naomi didn't break her gaze. She hadn't moved, hadn't spoken. But inside, her mind was spinning in every direction. She was thinking about her mother, who worked 2 nursing jobs to get Naomi through private school. She was thinking about that summer in college when she interned in a genetics lab and a professor asked if she was lost, assuming she was a janitor. She was thinking about how many times she had smiled through a fence, laughed off microaggressions, swallowed 1,000 quiet cuts just to avoid becoming the angry black woman. But not today. Chadwick reached into the bin and pulled down his coat, patting at the pockets, deliberately slow. A performance. He didn't find the ticket. The captain waited a moment longer, then turned to Mia. "Please confirm his assigned seat from the manifest." Mia's hands trembled slightly as she tapped at the screen. She paused, frowned, tapped again. "He's not assigned to 3A, she said softly. He's in 7C. The words hit harder than anything Naomi could have said herself. A low ripple moved through the cabin, the kind of murmur people make when they know something isn't right, but aren't sure if they're allowed to say so. Chadwick gave a short, dismissive snort. "Must be a system error," he said. "This isn't how it usually goes." Naomi looked away for the first time. Her eyes drifted to the window beyond the seat he refused to vacate. She saw the tarmac, a yellow luggage cart rolling by, the gleam of sun off the metal wing. She let her breath move slowly through her chest, counted 4 seconds in, 6 out. A grounding technique? Something her therapist had taught her when boardroom stress used to rob her of sleep. She had no intention of raising her voice, no interest in making a spectacle, but she could feel the cabin watching her, expecting something. Wasn't that always the case? When a black woman held her ground, the world wanted a show, wanted to see grace under pressure, strength without edge, power, but only if it didn't make them uncomfortable. She could feel it, that unspoken pressure to keep performing civility while being denied something as simple as a seat she had paid for. Captain Moore took a step forward. "Mr. Stone, I'll ask you one final time. Please return to your assigned seat." Chadwick stiffened. "I'm not moving," he said. "I don't care what your system says. I sit here every Monday. This is where I belong." Naomi flinched internally at the word belong. The implications laced through it like barbed wire. The way he said it casual, entitled, venomous in its confidence. She watched the captain's jaw tighten. He turned to Mia. "Contact the flight supervisor," he said quietly. "Now." Mia nodded and stepped toward the front of the plane, her steps quick. Naomi remained still. She hadn't spoken in nearly 10 minutes, but her silence felt louder than anything else in the cabin. Behind her, she heard a woman whisper, "Unbelievable." Another voice, male, replied in a low tone, "She should have just taken another seat." Naomi didn't turn around. She didn't have to. The words were meant to be overheard. Tiny barbs launched like paper darts. But what they didn't understand, what they likely never would, was that to her, this wasn't just about comfort, or even principle. It was about accumulation. Every time she let something slide, it added to the weight she carried, and the weight was already heavy enough. Mia returned with a taller man in a navy blazer, a Blue Haven badge on his chest. He walked with quiet authority, his expression unreadable. "Ms. Ellison, Mr. Stone." He nodded. "My name is Tobias Gray. I'm the onboard supervisor for this flight." Chadwick huffed. "Finally, someone with sense. Can we please fix this circus?" Tobias didn't smile. "I've reviewed the seating manifest, sir. You are not assigned to this seat. We've confirmed it multiple times. We need you to return to 7C immediately, or we will be forced to delay this flight." "I'm not moving," Chadwick repeated. Louder now. "This is ridiculous. She's trying to humiliate me. And for what? To make some political point?" Tobias's tone was measured. "She is not making a point. She's asking for what she paid for. Now please, do the right thing." Chadwick stood abruptly, sloshing what was left of his drink as he did. "You're all cowards," he barked, "letting this nonsense dictate who gets to sit where. This is my seat. I earned it." Naomi blinked slowly. The drink, the words, the entitlement wrapped in victimhood. It was all so familiar. "You didn't earn anything," she said softly. Everyone turned. Her voice hadn't changed in volume, but the stillness in it made it unmistakable. "You didn't earn this seat. You assumed it. And when confronted with truth, you doubled down." That's not strength. That's cowardice. Chadwick froze. For the first time, he looked uncertain. Tobias moved closer, his voice firmer now. Mr. Stone, this is your last opportunity. Return to your seat, or you will be escorted off the aircraft. The threat was no longer implied. It was real, and Chadwick could see it. His hand shook slightly as he grabbed his jacket. He turned without looking at Naomi, muttering under his breath, "You people always find a way to ruin everything." Naomi didn't reply. She watched him walk down the aisle, face tight with fury, neck flushed red. Passengers stared after him, some embarrassed, some silently pleased, others simply stunned that it had come this far. Tobias turned to Naomi. "Ma'am," he said gently, "you may take your seat now." She nodded, but she didn't move immediately. Instead, she stepped slowly into the row, placed her briefcase beneath the seat in front of her, and lowered herself into 3A. The leather was warm from Chadwick's body. She didn't flinch. She adjusted her scarf, reached for the seat belt, and clicked it into place. Only then did she allow herself to exhale. One long, steady breath. Outside the window, a jet taxied across the runway. The hum of the engines muffled the silence in the cabin. The whispering had stopped. No applause, no fanfare, just stillness, and the quiet understanding that something had shifted. Naomi sat quietly in seat 3A, her fingers resting lightly on the armrest, her breathing calm but controlled. The seatbelt lay fastened across her lap, a thin silver line of finality. For the first time since boarding, her body had stopped moving, but her mind hadn't. She could still feel the warmth of Chadwick's presence in the seat, like the echo of an unwelcome touch. It clung to her, not physically, but psychologically, the way disrespect leaves residue. Across the aisle, a woman with neatly curled blonde hair and an expensive-looking scarf turned her head and offered Naomi a fleeting smile. It wasn't a smile of kindness. It was tight, apologetic, the kind people give when they want to acknowledge something without getting involved. Naomi returned it with a nod, neither warm nor cold. She could feel the stares, not all of them hostile, some curious, some unsure, but they all carried the weight of judgment, people who had watched her stand through humiliation and wait for justice. Some had filmed, none had spoken. That was what stayed with her more than Chadwick's words. The silence, the passivity, the way injustice metastasizes not just through cruelty, but through inaction. She reached into the side pocket of her bag and pulled out a leather-bound notebook. Its corners were softened from use, the cover etched faintly with the initials N. E. She opened it to the dog-eared page she had bookmarked the night before, her keynote outline. She scanned the first line. Creating systems that heal instead of harm. She stared at those words for a long time, her eyes blurring just slightly. It was ironic, wasn't it, that she had come here to speak about equity in biotechnology, about the ethics of healing in a world that so often inflicted wounds without even noticing. And now, before she'd even left the ground, she'd been forced to relive the very harm she had spent her life learning to navigate. The pilot's voice crackled overhead. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. We'll be pushing back shortly. Please remain seated as we finalize the departure checklist. The usual script." His voice was steady, practiced, but Naomi heard something else in it too. A stiffness, a hesitation. Maybe he, too, was thinking about what had just occurred. Mia walked down the aisle again, passing by without a word, but leaving a small bottle of water and a packet of warm nuts on Naomi's tray table. Naomi gave a small, grateful nod. It wasn't much, but in this moment, it felt like a gesture of acknowledgement. One that said, "I saw what happened. I'm sorry I didn't know how to stop it sooner." Naomi didn't blame her. Not really. She had learned long ago that systems didn't just fail the people they harmed. They failed the people they trapped into silence, too. She unscrewed the bottle cap and took a sip. The water was cold, refreshing. It grounded her. Behind her. Someone whispered something she couldn't quite hear. A soft chuckle followed. She didn't turn. She refused to. A voice in her mind, one she hadn't heard in years, spoke softly from the past. You don't always have to carry yourself like a battle. It was her grandmother's voice, Clara May Ellison, the woman who raised her while her mother worked double shifts. Naomi remembered the way her grandmother used to fold laundry and preach wisdom like scripture, every word soaked in the pain and pride of survival. But this was a battle, even if she hadn't chosen it. A soft knock came at her armrest. She looked up to see Tobias Gray crouched beside her row, away from the aisle to avoid drawing attention. His voice was low. "Ms. Ellison, I just wanted to thank you for how you handled everything back there. It shouldn't have happened. And I want you to know we're documenting the incident and escalating it internally. Our internal protocol will reflect what you endured." Naomi studied his face. He was in his 50s, with salt and pepper hair and eyes that had clearly seen a lot. He wasn't just checking a box. He was carrying something, too. "Thank you," she said simply. "I know it wasn't your job to fix that, but I appreciate the way you did." He nodded once. Then, after a pause, he added quietly, "I have 2 daughters. I'd want them to see what you did, and know they can do it too." Naomi blinked. It wasn't just the words. It was the way he said them, like a man who had lived in a world that rarely offered men like him or women like her the benefit of grace. She gave him a soft smile, one of the few real ones she'd offered since boarding. "Thank you, Tobias. That means more than you know." He straightened, gave her a final nod, and returned to the galley. Naomi leaned back slightly. The hum of the engines began to rise. The plane vibrated beneath her, signaling pushback. As the aircraft rolled away from the gate, she closed her eyes for a moment. In the darkness behind her lids, images floated. The quiet fury in Chadwick's eyes, the discomfort in the passengers, the cold efficiency in Captain Moore's voice, but also the look in Tobias's eyes, the flicker of gratitude in Mia's. She thought of her assistant Jasmine, probably pacing her apartment back in Los Angeles, wondering if Naomi was okay. She thought of the email she would inevitably receive from someone at Blue Haven's corporate office, a carefully worded apology, possibly an offer for compensation, as if that could undo the weight of that moment. She thought of all the young women of color who would watch the video clip surely being uploaded right now, watched by strangers, judged by people who weren't there, dissected in comments and duets and quote tweets. She could already hear it. Why make a big deal out of it? She could have just taken another seat. Not everything's about race. She opened her eyes and stared at the seat back in front of her. What they would never understand, what they refused to understand, was that every time someone like her stayed silent, it reinforced the belief that silence was the price of dignity. But today, she hadn't paid that price. Today, she had chosen herself. As the plane lifted into the air, Naomi looked out the window and saw the city fall away below her. The grid of buildings, the winding highways, the shimmering coast. It all looked small from here. But her world had grown a little larger. She didn't feel triumphant. This wasn't a victory. Not yet. But it was something. It was a refusal to disappear. She folded her hands in her lap and exhaled slowly. The cabin settled into quiet. Passengers adjusted pillows, flipped through in-flight magazines, pulled out tablets and earbuds. No one looked at her anymore. But she knew they had, and that was enough. The plane had been in the air for less than 40 minutes, cruising smoothly above a stretch of arid desert somewhere between California and Oregon. But Naomi felt a turbulence that didn't show up on the seatbelt sign. She stared out the window at the endless blue, the clouds far below soft as cotton, pulled loose by wind. Her reflection in the glass looked calm, but inside she was restless. It wasn't the incident itself, though, that had scraped at her dignity like sandpaper. It was everything that came with it. She'd expected anger, but what surprised her was the sadness creeping up in waves, more persistent than she wanted to admit. She was tired, not in the way sleep fixes, but in the way a soul gets tired of proving itself to rooms that shouldn't need convincing, of showing restraint when others show entitlement, of holding her head high while others lower their standards. Naomi picked up her phone from the tray table, opened her notes app, and began typing. Flight 3481. Incident log. She hesitated. Was she really documenting it? For HR Legal. Her own memory. She wasn't sure yet. She wrote anyway. Man in seat 3A. Named Chadwick Stone. Refused to move. Claimed the seat despite a signed boarding pass for 7C. Disrespect escalated to racial overtones and entitled behavior. Crew initially hesitant. Captain Moore and Supervisor Gray eventually intervened. She paused. Her thumb hovered over the keyboard. Did she need to include how he looked at her? The tone in his voice? The fact that when he said, "People like you always make things complicated," she knew exactly what he meant. She didn't type that part. Not yet. The notes weren't for anyone else. Not yet. At least. A small voice beside her pulled her out of the screen. "Excuse me, are you okay?" Naomi turned slightly. A girl, maybe 9 or 10, stood in the aisle holding a coloring book and a purple crayon. Her hair was in 2 messy pigtails, and her eyes were wide with concern. Naomi blinked, unsure of how to respond at first. "Yes, I'm okay, sweetheart," she said gently. "Why do you ask?" The girl shrugged. "My mom said you were really brave. I just wanted to say that." Naomi felt her throat tighten unexpectedly. "What's your name, Jasmine?" The girl replied. "Like the flower." Naomi smiled. "That's a beautiful name. Thank you for checking on me." Jasmine grinned, nodded, and skipped back to row 5, where her mother gave Naomi a warm, knowing look. There it was again. That quiet current of recognition between women who understood. Naomi hadn't cried in a long time, but now she felt it rising. Not in a dramatic way, not like a dam bursting, more like water quietly pooling where it had once dried up. She blinked a few times, pulled herself upright, and took a long breath through her nose. She didn't want pity. She wasn't broken, but she was human. And today had reminded her just how much she still carried. Mia returned with a new tray, this time with tea and a fresh baked cookie. "Compliments of the cockpit," Mia said quietly. Naomi gave her a soft, "Thank you." Mia lingered a moment, then sat gently on the armrest of the empty seat across the aisle. "I've worked first class for 4 years," she said in a low voice, "and I've seen a lot. But I've never seen someone hold it together the way you did." Naomi looked at her. "You shouldn't have had to." Mia looked down, ashamed. "I should have said something sooner. I hesitated. I let him talk over you." "You're not the only one," Naomi replied. It happens to a lot of us. Good people, smart people. Silence is what gets rewarded when the alternative risks your job. Mia nodded, eyes moist. If it means anything, I won't forget this. Not the way you handled him, the way you made space without demanding it. Naomi placed a hand on her teacup. You make space by standing still sometimes, but someone always has to be the one who doesn't move first. Mia stood up quietly. If you ever need anything on this flight or any other, my name is Mia Tran. I'll remember that. She walked away, and Naomi let the warmth of the tea calm her hands. There was an email waiting on her phone from Jasmine Rowe, her assistant. Naomi, just saw the news. It's already on Twitter. A few clips from other passengers. Want me to get ahead of it? Naomi sighed. The internet always moved faster than the truth. She opened Twitter. A 30-second clip already had 80,000 views. It captured the moment Captain Moore told Chadwick he was in the wrong seat, followed by Naomi's quiet refusal to move. The comments were exactly what she expected, equal parts support, outrage, and ignorance. She scrolled a bit further and stopped at a quote tweet. This black woman handled the situation with more grace than I could ever muster. People like Chadwick Stone are exactly why we need these conversations. Another tweet read Naomi Ellison. Remember that name. Not because of what happened to her, but because of how she responded. She closed the app. Her hand trembled slightly as she placed the phone on her lap. She had never wanted to go viral. She wanted progress, quiet change, a world where this kind of confrontation didn't need to happen, where she could board a plane and be just another traveler with a seat and a destination. But here she was, and she knew what came next. Statements, messages of solidarity, corporate apologies, think pieces, interviews. She'd been through it before. Not like this, but close enough. The machine always moved fast when the optics got bad enough. She picked up her pen and scribbled in her notebook. Do not let them turn your pain into a marketing strategy. She underlined it. Then she wrote something else. Use this, on your terms. She leaned back and closed her eyes. For a moment, she let her thoughts drift. Back to college, when she almost dropped out after a professor mocked her pronunciation of a medical term. Back to her first company pitch, when a VC asked if her white co-founder was the real brain. All the moments she had swallowed and stored. And now, one seat on one plane had made them all bubble to the surface. She wasn't angry, not anymore. She was awake. And as the plane glided toward its cruising altitude, Naomi felt something shift in her. Not rage, not victory, resolve. Naomi hadn't meant to fall asleep, but the exhaustion hit her mid-sentence, somewhere between a bullet point about regulatory frameworks and a half-sipped cup of herbal tea. Her body had decided what her mind refused to admit: she needed rest. She awoke slowly, blinking into the soft lighting of the cabin. Outside the window, the sun had dipped lower, painting the sky in a haze of pink and lavender. The hush of the plane was oddly soothing. Most of the passengers were either asleep or deeply engaged in screens and books. A strange kind of calm had settled in. But beneath it, Naomi could feel something else, something shifting. Her phone buzzed in her lap. A message from Jasmine Rowe. Naomi, you're trending. Major outlets are calling. CNN, MSNBC, even a couple of podcasts. Want me to filter or respond? Naomi exhaled and rubbed her eyes. A headache stirred behind them, the kind that comes from trying to remain composed while everything around you turns louder than you asked for. She typed back, "Don't respond yet." Let's wait until I land. Then she clicked the lock button and let the phone fall gently into her lap again. She could feel the weight of it. Not just the device, but what it contained. The swelling public narrative, the footage taken without her permission, the hashtags, the commentary, the assumptions, her face becoming a symbol she hadn't asked to be. In seat 4C, she caught the gaze of a man who had been watching her. He looked familiar in the way some men do sharp suit, carefully trimmed beard, air of self-importance. He gave her a small nod, respectful but performative. She returned it politely, then looked away. He didn't speak to her, but he didn't need to. The look had said enough. "You're the woman from the video. I saw you. I'm impressed. I'm watching." She didn't want to be watched. Not now. Not like this. She opened her notebook again, flipping past her outline to a fresh page. What happens when strength becomes spectacle? She wrote it slowly, pressing harder than she needed to. She didn't want to be brave for the camera. She didn't want to become another image in the timeline of viral resistance. She wanted to be able to sit down, to travel in peace, to exist without making a statement simply by refusing to be erased. She heard footsteps approaching, looked up. It was Captain Moore. He knelt beside her seat discreetly, avoiding attention. His voice was low, meant only for her. "Ms. Ellison, I hope I'm not disturbing you. I just wanted to check in." "You're not," she said. "Thank you for coming." He hesitated. "I wanted to say, I admire the way you handled that man. Not just for holding your ground, but for refusing to escalate. That kind of calm under pressure isn't common." Naomi offered a small, tired smile. "Years of practice," she said. "You learn how to protect yourself in silence." He nodded slowly, understanding more than she expected. "I've seen a lot in this job," he said, "but not enough women like you being treated with the respect they deserve." "That's the thing about respect," she replied. "People think it's earned, but for some of us, it's always been withheld." He looked down, thoughtful. "This flight has made me think," he said, "about my own silences, things I let slide in the name of staying neutral." Naomi turned slightly to face him more fully. "Neutrality always favors power. Silence is rarely neutral." He met her gaze. "I know. I just wanted you to know that you shifted something today, whether you meant to or not." She looked at him for a long second. "Thank you for saying that." He gave a nod and stood. "We'll be landing in about an hour. Let me know if you need anything." As he returned to the cockpit, Naomi felt a strange warmth stir in her chest. Not comfort, exactly, but recognition. Another moment of humanity in a day that had tried so hard to strip hers away. She reached for her phone again. Notifications had exploded. She scrolled past messages from journalists, invitations to comment, threads dissecting her career. Then she saw it. A video clip, just 14 seconds long, posted by a teenager 2 rows behind her. It showed the exact moment Chadwick had said, "People like you always make things complicated." Naomi watched herself in the video, calm, silent, immovable. She didn't flinch, but now, seeing it from the outside, she noticed something new. The way the cabin froze after his words. How some passengers turned their faces. Others watched without blinking. How silence had fallen like a curtain, as if no one wanted to be next to breathe too loudly. And then her, standing there, still, dignified. She clicked to the comments. They were flooding in. That stare she gave him iconic. This woman is the definition of grace under fire. How many black women have had to master that expression just to survive? And then one that stopped her cold. She shouldn't have had to do any of that. She clicked on the profile. A young woman, afro-textured hair. Bio said doctoral candidate in cultural psychology. The comment wasn't loud. It wasn't flashy. But it was the truth that had lodged in her chest all day. She shouldn't have had to, and yet she had. Her phone rang. Jasmine Rowe again. Naomi answered quietly. "You okay?" Jasmine asked. "I will be," Naomi said. "Want me to start drafting a statement?" "No. Pause on that. Another beat. Actually, maybe we do write something, but not a response. Something else." "What kind of something?" "A letter." To who? Naomi looked out the window again. The sun was slipping into the clouds now, casting gold light across the wing. "To anyone who's ever stood in an aisle like mine," she said. Not sure if they were going to be allowed to sit down. There was silence on the other end. Then Jasmine said softly, "Say the word." "I'll get started." "Not yet." Naomi replied, "Let me finish the flight. I want to land before I speak." "Fair. One more thing," Jasmine added. "Chadwick Stone, he's already on a podcast talking about you, claiming you overreacted, saying you made a scene to go viral." "Of course he is," Naomi said calmly. "You want us to respond?" "No," Naomi said. "Not to him. The only people I respond to are the ones who deserve to be heard." She ended the call and closed her eyes again. This time not out of fatigue, but because she was beginning to form something in her mind. Not a reaction, not a defense. A message. The kind of message that doesn't ask for permission. One that doesn't center apology. She reached for her pen again. She began to write to the woman who held her breath in seat 22B, to the father whose son was questioned for boarding in a hoodie, to the child who watched his mother be spoken down to every person who has ever been told they were in the wrong place, when in fact, the system had simply never made space for them. She paused, then continued, "You are not alone. And this time, we didn't shrink. The seat is mine, and I took it." The captain's voice came over the intercom, low and steady. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've begun our initial descent into Seattle. Please ensure your seatbelts are fastened, tray tables are upright, and carry-ons are stowed beneath the seat in front of you." Naomi exhaled and slowly closed her notebook. The descent always brought a strange shift. It wasn't just the pressure in the cabin or the tilt of gravity. It was the quiet reckoning, a moment of returning. You leave one sky and prepare to re-enter a world that had moved on without you for a few hours. Only this time, the world Naomi was descending into had changed. Because of her. She had barely moved the entire flight. Her back was stiff, her neck tight, but her thoughts had stretched and wandered, mapping out what needed to come next. There were calls to return, meetings to anticipate, a summit to headline in less than 18 hours. Yet none of it felt more urgent than what had just happened 30,000 feet above the ground. The seatbelt sign chimed. Around her, passengers stirred. Tablets were powered off, pillows pushed aside. Naomi heard the quiet shuffle of heels and the rustling of designer bags. From the outside, the flight had been routine, but inside her, a storm was still moving. She glanced toward the front where Captain Moore had emerged briefly, exchanging hushed words with flight attendants. Mia was nodding quietly. Tobias was near the cockpit door, his posture tense. Naomi narrowed her eyes. Something felt off. Then she saw it. Chadwick Stone. He was standing in the aisle near row 1, gesturing sharply at one of the flight attendants. His face was flushed. Not just from alcohol, but from something more volatile. He wasn't yelling. Not quite, but the force of his voice was enough to make heads turn. You should have had me moved to another plane. This is harassment. That woman tried to humiliate me. The flight attendant, a young black man named Elijah, stood calmly in front of him. Sir, please return to your seat. We're in descent. I'm asking you respectfully. She doesn't belong up here. Everyone saw it. She caused a scene, and now I'm the one being punished. Naomi didn't move. She sat perfectly still watching. Elijah repeated with more firmness. Return to your seat, sir. Now. Chadwick hesitated. Then, as if testing the air, he turned and looked directly at Naomi. His lip curled. You think this is over? Naomi held his gaze. Yes, she said. I do. Chadwick stood frozen for a beat. Then Elijah stepped in front of him and pointed to 7C. Now, sir. Chadwick turned with a bitter huff and walked stiffly back to his seat. Naomi didn't look away until he was gone. Mia returned a moment later with a quick update. He's upset that the airline flagged his account. He won't be able to board another Blue Haven flight without supervisor review. And you, Naomi asked. Mia blinked. Mia, are you okay? Mia gave a half smile. I will be. Thank you. They shared a quiet understanding. One woman who had stood, another who had watched and decided. Next time, she wouldn't be silent. The landing gear dropped with a mechanical thud. Naomi felt the slight lurch in her chest as the plane adjusted course. The ground rose slowly to meet them, the city lights growing clearer by the second. She thought about the speech she was supposed to give tomorrow, the script she had spent weeks revising, the careful order of ideas, the measured tone, the language that made hard truths more palatable for boardrooms filled with people who still hesitated before acknowledging harm. She didn't want to give that speech anymore. She wanted to give the one she hadn't written yet, the one that was forming even now. As the plane touched down with a soft bounce, Naomi sat with her hands folded in her lap, spine straight. The wheels roared beneath them. The cabin braced, then relaxed, and then the plane slowed. A voice came over the intercom again. It wasn't the captain. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Tobias Gray, flight supervisor for Blue Haven. Please remain seated. We have a short delay at the gate while local authorities board to address a passenger matter. The cabin went still. Naomi did not react. She simply waited. Chadwick stood up before the seatbelt sign turned off, reaching for his bag. Sit down, sir, Elijah said. Final warning. You can't keep me here. Chadwick snapped. I'll sue this airline for everything it's worth. The woman in seat 5A muttered, You should have thought of that before calling someone the help. Naomi heard it. So did half the cabin. Chadwick's face turned crimson. The door opened. 2 officers entered, followed by a Blue Haven official in a navy blazer. Mr. Stone, one officer said calmly, please come with us. This is ridiculous. He snapped. We can do this calmly or not. The officer replied. Chadwick grabbed his bag, knocked over a tray, and stormed toward the front. As he passed Naomi, he spat the words. This was your plan all along, wasn't it? Naomi didn't blink. My only plan was to sit in the seat I paid for. The cabin was silent. He was escorted off the plane. Only when the doors closed again did the hum of quiet conversation resume. Naomi felt the tension lift, like a pressure that had been pushing against her chest had finally broken. As passengers began to disembark, several people stopped by her row. A middle-aged woman placed a gentle hand on Naomi's shoulder and whispered, Thank you. My daughter's watching the video right now. She says you're her hero. An older man with a veteran's cap gave a nod. "You handled that better than I ever could have." Naomi offered a soft smile to each of them. She didn't feel like a hero. She felt tired, but she also felt something else now. Seen. When the aisle was clear, Mia came back one last time. "We've arranged a private exit," she said. "Media's already outside the main terminal." Naomi stood, gathered her bag, and gave Mia a long look. "Thank you for walking with me through this, even when it was uncomfortable." "I'll do better next time," Mia said quietly. "That's all any of us can do." Naomi stepped off the plane into a quiet, roped-off jet bridge. Jasmine was waiting with a warm coat and a bottle of water. "You okay?" she asked softly. Naomi nodded. "Let's get to the hotel." Jasmine hesitated. "There's a press conference request. Mayor's office. They want to recognize what you did." Naomi smiled faintly. "I didn't do anything but not move." "Exactly," Jasmine replied. "That's what made it powerful." Naomi looked down the empty hallway, then back toward the plane. "Let's go," she said, "because tomorrow the real work begins." The view from Naomi's hotel suite stretched wide across Seattle's early skyline. Morning sun bathed the buildings in soft amber, catching the tips of glass towers and construction cranes. The city was already humming awake below, but up here, everything was still. She stood barefoot near the window, coffee in one hand, phone in the other. Her hair was loosely pinned back, eyes still swollen with sleep. She hadn't rested well, and the tightness in her shoulders refused to leave. A notification buzzed. Blue Haven Airlines official statement. "We are actively investigating the events that took place aboard Flight BH3481. Discrimination of any kind has no place on our aircraft. We will be conducting an internal review." She sipped her coffee and stared at the words. They were expected, polished, vague, designed to diffuse rather than confront. Another buzz. A message from her friend Lena, a human rights attorney in Chicago. "You handled that with such grace, but don't let them co-opt your story. Call me when you can." Naomi placed the phone on the windowsill and exhaled slowly. A knock at the door. Jasmine entered, already dressed in business casual, holding a printed schedule and a folder marked Press Inquiries. "Good morning. Naomi. Room service is on the way. I thought we'd eat before the press call." Naomi nodded and walked to the table. "You didn't sleep much, did you?" Jasmine asked gently. "Sleep's not easy when the world is watching your dignity in slow-motion replay." Jasmine placed the folder down. "Well, you're not watching it alone, and you don't have to perform for anyone today." Naomi looked at her. "That's the problem. They don't want the real me. They want the calm, well-spoken woman who didn't yell. The black woman who makes it easy to sympathize without feeling guilt." "You're not wrong," Jasmine said, "but you still get to decide what they hear next." Room service arrived moments later. Scrambled eggs, fresh fruit, 2 slices of toast, and black coffee. Naomi ate slowly, chewing without tasting. Her mind wasn't on food. "Tell me the lineup," she finally said. "At 10, we meet with the mayor's office. They want to offer a public statement of support. At 11:30, CNN wants a live sit-down. You can say no. What else? A local nonprofit is hoping you'll speak at their anti-discrimination summit tomorrow. Blue Haven's CEO is requesting a private meeting." Naomi raised an eyebrow. "That soon? Apparently he flew in last night." She pushed her plate away. "I need to think." Jasmine nodded and sat quietly, giving her space. Naomi turned toward the window again. Outside, the streets grew busier. The world went on. She felt suspended between one version of herself and the next. Not quite the woman who boarded the flight, but not yet the one people now imagined. She was in transition, the kind that couldn't be captured in viral clips or polite interviews. "Do you ever feel like you're being rewritten by strangers?" she asked suddenly. Jasmine looked up. "All the time." Naomi turned back. "I'm not a symbol. I'm a woman who paid for a seat and refused to give it up. That shouldn't require courage. That shouldn't be national news. But it is," Jasmine replied softly. "And that's the point." Naomi folded her arms. "If I speak today, I don't want it to be about Chadwick or the airline. I want it to be about the people who watched it happen and said nothing. I want it to be about the systems that make that kind of silence normal." Jasmine opened her notebook. "Then we write a new kind of statement. On your terms." By the time they arrived at City Hall, Naomi was calm again, but focused. She wore a deep navy pantsuit and a silver pin shaped like a compass, a quiet symbol of direction, clarity, and self-trust. The mayor greeted her with a handshake and cameras flashing. "Thank you for your strength, Ms. Ellison. You've inspired this entire city." Naomi accepted the gesture but didn't smile. Not out of rudeness, but because it wasn't about inspiration for her. It was about disruption. As the press conference began, Naomi stood behind the podium, the city seal gleaming beneath her hands. "Good morning," she began. "I wasn't planning to make headlines this week. I was on my way to speak about biomedical innovation, about healthcare equity, about saving lives through access, but something else demanded my voice before I could speak about any of those things." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. "On flight BH3481, I was told without apology that I did not belong in the seat I had booked, paid for, and assigned. Not because of a mix-up, not because of an error, but because another passenger believed his comfort outweighed my right to exist where I belonged." She looked across the rows of reporters. "This isn't new. Not for me. Not for millions of people who move through the world carrying the burden of explaining their presence, justifying their credentials, softening their tone, proving they are not threats. But I'm tired of proving. I'm here to affirm." More cameras flashed. A hush filled the chamber. We don't need to make ourselves small so others can stay comfortable. We don't need to shrink our brilliance to fit pre-approved narratives. And most of all, we don't need to give up our seats. Because we were never asking for permission. We were claiming space we already earned. She stepped back from the podium. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was charged. People weren't clapping. Not yet. They were thinking, and Naomi was glad for that. Back in the car, Jasmine handed her a bottle of water. "That was the best you've ever spoken." Naomi leaned her head back. "It was the first time I've spoken entirely for me." They rode in silence until Jasmine's phone rang. "It's Blue Haven," she said after glancing at the screen. Naomi raised an eyebrow. "Put it on speaker?" A male voice came through the line, professional but cautious. "Ms. Ellison, this is Robert Langston, CEO of Blue Haven Airlines. I wanted to personally extend my apology and request a meeting at your convenience." Naomi's voice was calm. "Your company has protocols." "Correct." "Yes, ma'am. We failed them in this case." "No. You didn't fail a protocol. You failed a principle. Protocols are written to avoid embarrassment. Principles are how you treat people when no one is watching." Langston paused. "I would still appreciate the chance to speak in person." Naomi looked at Jasmine, then out the window again. "I'll consider it, but I don't do closed-door apologies." "Understood. And one more thing. Mr. Langston, yes, I'm not looking for a settlement. I'm looking for structural change, diversity in senior cabin crew, real anti-bias training, and passenger accountability for discriminatory behavior. Langston cleared his throat. We're open to a formal review. Then start there. And until then, your airline can learn to fly without me. She ended the call. Jasmine laughed softly. You're going to start a movement. Naomi shook her head. No, I'm just done asking. Naomi stood beneath the bright lights of the recording studio. A small, sleek earpiece fit snug behind her ear, and the mic clipped at her collar picked up the rhythmic cadence of her breath. She wasn't nervous, not exactly, but she was aware of every word, every pause, every shift in tone that could be interpreted as too sharp, too soft, too much. Across from her sat Gloria Marshall, host of the nationally syndicated program Voices at the Table. Gloria was known for her careful questions and no-nonsense demeanor. She wasn't here to flatter. She was here to listen. And Naomi had chosen this space for exactly that reason. We're live in 5, the producer said through the glass. Naomi adjusted the cuffs of her blazer. Forest green this time, chosen intentionally to soften the contrast of the past few days. The cameras rolled. The red light blinked on. Gloria smiled at her. Welcome to Voices at the Table. I'm here today with Naomi Ellison, biotech CEO, and now the subject of a national conversation about race, class, and belonging at 30,000 feet. Naomi, thank you for joining us. Thank you. Gloria, I appreciate the invitation. Let's begin with the obvious. That moment on the flight. When Chadwick Stone refused to leave your seat. When the crew hesitated to act what was going through your mind. Naomi took a slow breath. Honestly, disbelief. At first. Then something much older. Something I've felt walking into boardrooms, hotels, even my own offices. That quiet voice that asks, do they think I belong here? Did you ever consider just walking away? Of course, we all do. But the thing about compromise is it accumulates. You give a little here, a little there, until one day you've made yourself so small, you can't even recognize the shape of your own dignity. Gloria paused. That's powerful. It's also exhausting, Naomi said softly. I wasn't angry in that moment. I was tired. And tired doesn't always mean defeated. Sometimes it means clear. Gloria leaned forward slightly. Do you think the public understands that the emotional cost of moments like this? Some do. Many don't. And the danger is that they see the calm exterior and assume it was easy. But what people call composure is often just containment. Years of knowing that the world gives fewer chances to people who react while black. The air in the studio shifted. Even the crew grew still. What about the people who say you're making this bigger than it needs to be? Naomi looked straight into the lens. Then they haven't been listening. This wasn't just about a seat. It was about what happens when entitlement meets silence. When those in power look away, while harm is happening inches from their reach. I'm not the first person this happened to. I was just the one who didn't move. You said earlier this week that you weren't looking for a settlement, that this is about structural change. What does that look like? Naomi's voice steadied. It looks like investment in real anti-bias training, not slideshows, lived experience simulations, passenger conduct policies that mean something. It looks like career pathways for flight staff from marginalized communities. And it looks like accountability that doesn't require public outcry to activate. Gloria's expression softened. You've clearly thought this through. I've lived it through. There was a pause. Then Gloria asked what no one else had. Have you cried? Naomi blinked. Not yet, but I probably will. And when I do, it won't be because of Chadwick Stone or Blue Haven Airlines. It'll be because for once, I didn't shrink, and I saw the world bend towards something true. The interview ended with no applause, just silence, the kind that lingers, the kind that says everything has changed. After the taping, Jasmine met her outside the studio with a phone full of messages. That clip of you saying containment is not composure is already going viral. Every outlet's reposting it. Even Ava DuVernay shared it with the caption, "Say it again." Naomi smiled faintly. We don't need viral. We need vision. You've got both now. Back at the hotel, a package was waiting at the front desk. A small envelope with her name handwritten in looping script. Inside was a letter. Ms. Ellison, you don't know me, but I was on that flight. Row 27. I watched the whole thing. I didn't say a word. I teach 8th grade. And every day I tell my students to stand up for what's right. But I couldn't even get out of my seat to support a stranger. I'm sorry, and I'm grateful. Because now I understand silence better. It's not harmless. It's a choice. I promise to do better. You reminded me what integrity looks like in public. Thank you. Sincerely. Megan O'Neill. Naomi folded the letter carefully and placed it in her suitcase. She had no need to share it online. Some moments belonged in the quiet. That night, she stood by the window again, the city now lit up with movement and light. She thought about her father, who used to say that legacy isn't what you build, it's what you refuse to break. She had spent years building companies, labs, teams, but maybe her legacy would be about something else entirely. Maybe it would be about refusing to step aside when asked. There was a knock. Jasmine peeked in. Sorry to interrupt, but you're going to want to see this. She held up her phone. It's Blue Haven. They just published a full policy update. Naomi took the phone. A new web page had launched. Passenger Code of Equity, updated hiring practices crew cultural literacy requirement, anonymous discrimination reporting platform CEO's public apology. And at the bottom, this change is not in response to public pressure. It's in response to justice. Naomi handed the phone back. They listened. Jasmine grinned. Because you made them. No, because we didn't let them look away. They sat in silence again, both women staring out into the skyline. You ready for tomorrow? Jasmine asked. What's tomorrow? Your keynote at the conference. Naomi took a long sip of water. Let's rewrite it. Again. Jasmine raised an eyebrow. You've rewritten it 4 times? Then 5 will be the charm. What's the theme? Naomi smiled. Legacy. And the courage it takes to sit down and stay seated. The ballroom at the Seattle BioFrontier Conference Center was filled to capacity. Rows of folding chairs lined with professionals in tailored suits, lanyards swinging like flags of belonging, industry leaders, young interns, university scholars, and quiet observers all packed shoulder to shoulder, eyes trained on the stage. Jasmine stood backstage, glancing at the time. 9:59 m. Naomi stood still, holding a note card in one hand, her phone in the other. She wasn't reviewing stats or slides. She wasn't rehearsing. She was remembering. She scrolled back to a photo from 3 years ago. Her father, sitting in their family's tiny Alabama backyard, a wide-brimmed hat shielding his face from the sun, a book of poems on his lap. He used to say, "Speak only when silence becomes betrayal." She tucked the phone away. You sure you want to go without a script? Jasmine whispered. I'm more sure than I've ever been. A ripple went through the crowd as her name was announced. Please welcome our keynote speaker, Naomi Ellison, CEO of Ellison Neurotech and recent recipient of the Global Civic Integrity Award. Applause echoed as Naomi stepped out. She wore no lapel pin today, no carefully chosen accessory to soften the room. Just a deep maroon blouse, black slacks, and a look that said, I am not here to impress you. I am here to tell you the truth. She stood for a moment without speaking. Then she leaned into the mic. I had a different speech planned. Laughter, soft and polite. I spent months writing it, editing it, polishing every line so it could land without friction, so it could be smart but non-threatening, bold but agreeable. She paused, and then 5 days ago, I boarded a plane. Silence returned. You know the story by now. You've seen the footage. You've read the editorials. You've shared the hashtags. And still, I don't think we're talking about the right thing. This isn't about a seat on a plane. It's about every time we ask people to prove they belong somewhere they've already earned. She took a breath. I was 10 years old when I first watched my mother be ignored by a pharmacist. He looked past her like she was a shadow. It wasn't about the prescription. It was about the power to decide who matters. That day, my mother said something I'll never forget. You can't teach someone to see you, but you can refuse to disappear. Naomi looked around the room. I built a company. I built patents. I built pathways for first-gen students and single moms and veterans returning to science after service. But I still had to sit on that plane and remind people I was not invisible. Because progress isn't permanent. It has to be protected. There was a stir of movement. A man in the third row lowered his head. When I refused to move, I wasn't making a scene. I was making a stand. For every woman who's been told her seat was a favor. For every black professional who's been mistaken for staff. For every quiet voice who's been talked over and still keeps showing up. Applause erupted. Naomi paused, waiting for it to settle. Let me be clear. I don't want sympathy. I want systems that don't require survival skills just to take a flight. This room, this field, we deal in data, in diagnostics, in discovery. But we often fail to diagnose our own blind spots. She lifted her eyes. How many panels still only have one kind of voice? How many funding meetings still assume diversity means a checklist instead of a conversation? This industry knows how to build exoskeletons and artificial limbs. But do we know how to build equity, real, measurable equity? The room was quiet again, not out of discomfort, out of recognition. Naomi continued, I've been asked dozens of times this week how I stayed so calm, as if composure is the goal, as if my value is tied to my restraint. But I want to say something plainly. It should not take composure to receive decency. It should not take silence to earn safety. It should not take a camera to prove the truth. Naomi felt her voice shake, not from weakness, but from weight. I didn't plan to be anyone's symbol. I planned to speak about neuroconnectivity and medical robotics and pathways to healing. But maybe that's what this is too, a kind of healing. Naomi let that land. She stepped away from the mic, then returned once more. I don't know what you expected today, but I hope you leave here with more than inspiration. I hope you leave with questions you're not afraid to ask. Who's not in the room? Who's still being asked to give up their seat? And most of all, whose voice have you silenced just by staying quiet? Because change doesn't start when something goes viral. It starts when you decide not to look away. Thank you. The applause came slowly, then grew. It was not just clapping. It was standing. It was sustained. It was people recognizing not just excellence, but truth spoken without armor. Backstage, Jasmine wiped at her eye with the corner of her sleeve. You didn't just shift the room. You rewired it. Naomi smiled. Now let's see what they do with it. An hour later, they returned to the hotel. Naomi removed her heels and sank into the couch. Her phone lit up again. This time it wasn't media. It was Lena. Voice message. Naomi hit play. You said what I've been trying to explain to boardrooms for 10 years. You cracked it wide open. I'm proud of you. Naomi. And I've got lawyers drafting something big. If you're ready to take it further, we're with you. Naomi stared at the ceiling. The movement was becoming real. She didn't set out to lead it. But maybe that was exactly why it was working. Because she wasn't demanding attention. She was refusing to be erased. That night, she journaled alone in her room. No screens, no headlines, just her pen and a thought she kept coming back to. Dignity isn't a performance. It's a position. You either hold it or you let it go. And this time, she held it. Not just for herself, but for everyone watching from the middle seat, waiting to know if it was safe to stand up. A week had passed since Naomi's keynote, but the energy hadn't faded. If anything, it had grown louder, deeper, more urgent. Every day brought a new headline. CEO who refused to move inspires airline policy overhaul. Naomi Ellison, the calm face of a reckoning. Beyond the seat, a national conversation on power, place, and race. But Naomi wasn't focused on headlines anymore. She was focused on the ripple. In a quiet school outside St. Louis, a teacher named Megan O'Neill printed a poster that read, "Silence is a decision." She hung it above her chalkboard and asked her 8th grade class to write about a time they regretted not speaking up. And so, in a small airline union in Denver, 4 flight attendants of color met over coffee and formed a new advocacy group. They called it Cabin Voices, their first initiative pushing for third-party bias investigations and protected whistleblower clauses. In a mid-sized biotech company in North Carolina, a black woman named Patrice looked at a boardroom full of men and said, Naomi Ellison sits at tables like this every day. If she can call out injustice, so can I. Then she respectfully challenged a hiring pipeline that had excluded candidates of color for years. Naomi didn't know all of this yet, but she could feel the current shifting. That morning, she sat in a quiet cafe near her office in Oakland. No cameras, no meetings, just her, a notebook, and a cup of chamomile tea cooling beside her hand. Across the table sat Lena, dressed in a navy-wrapped dress, her legal pad half filled with notes in neat cursive. "You've started something real," Lena said. "But now it needs a frame. A frame. A foundation. A legal entity. You've got influence. Naomi. But if you want lasting impact, you need infrastructure." Naomi looked out the window. People passed by with grocery bags, headphones, backpacks, ordinary lives, carrying silent histories. I never planned to be a movement. Lena smiled. That's why it works. They brainstormed for over an hour. Names, programs, funding. Naomi scribbled ideas in her notebook between sips of tea. By the end, 2 words circled in bold ink. The Seat Project. It would be a nonprofit. Its mission to advocate for equity in public and corporate spaces, starting with the travel industry but reaching far beyond. Programs would include leadership fellowships for marginalized professionals, legal support for discrimination cases, a mentorship network for first-generation executives, a digital platform to report and track racial bias in service industries. By noon, Naomi had a call with a major philanthropic group interested in backing the idea. By evening, they had 3 confirmed donors. Jasmine texted a simple message. This is becoming real. Later that night, Naomi returned to her home. The city lights glowed through the wide windows, and the quiet of her apartment welcomed her like an old friend. She kicked off her shoes and wandered into the kitchen, opened the fridge, closed it again. She wasn't hungry. She was full in other ways. She opened her journal and began to write. I used to think that strength meant not letting anyone see you crack. But maybe real strength is being willing to show where you've broken and why you chose to mend. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She let it go to voicemail. Then a second buzz. Voicemail received. She tapped play. Naomi, this is Marcia from Blue Haven. I know we've had our tensions, but I wanted to say something. We've let too much rot live in the foundation. You made it impossible to ignore. I'm retiring next quarter, but before I do, I'm endorsing the full policy overhaul. Not just for you, for everyone. I hope you'll meet with our new inclusion lead once they're appointed. Thank you. You moved us further than 20 consultants ever did. Naomi closed her eyes. Small ripples, big waters. 2 days later, she stood in front of a high school auditorium in Oakland. Not a press event, not a panel, just a group of teenagers, some in hoodies, some in uniforms, all watching her with curious, cautious eyes. She told them the story, not just the polished version, the real one. She told them about the first time she was called the wrong name in a chemistry lab and was too afraid to correct the professor. She told them about walking into an investor pitch where no one made room at the table. She told them about the moment she almost stepped back, not on the plane, but years before when a mentor warned her, "Don't ruffle feathers if you want longevity." But I've learned, she said, that longevity without justice is just survival in disguise. You don't owe anyone your silence. One student, a tall girl with dark braids and steel in her voice, raised her hand. What if they say you're making it all about race? Naomi didn't flinch. Then you say the truth should never make anyone uncomfortable unless they've gotten too used to comfort bought at someone else's expense. Another student asked. What if we're not ready to be brave like you? Naomi walked closer to them. You don't have to be ready. You just have to be willing. Courage isn't a moment. It's a practice. One small decision at a time. When the bell rang, several students stayed behind. One boy shyly handed her a note. Thank you for not moving. I didn't think people like you were real. Naomi blinked back tears as she folded the paper. Later that week, she sat across from the newly appointed Blue Haven Inclusion Director, a young Latina named Sylvia Herrera. We've got a lot to fix, Sylvia admitted, but you've given us a blueprint. If you're willing, I'd love to build this with your insight. Naomi smiled. Then let's build something we're not afraid to fly with. By Friday, the SEAT Project's website launched. Within hours, applications poured in from educators, startup founders, community organizers, and cabin crew from all over the country. Naomi scrolled through the messages late that night. Some were short and practical, others were long and raw, but one stuck with her. It was from a flight attendant named Kareem. He wrote, I've seen so many moments like yours happen quietly. Passengers removed because they made someone uncomfortable. Crew members reprimanded for challenging white entitlement. Watching you stand still reminded me that stillness is power. I've joined your project, and I'm not afraid to speak anymore. Naomi placed the phone down and looked out her window. The city moved below her. Airplanes blinked in the distant night sky. Somewhere up there, someone else was about to be tested. And this time, they wouldn't have to do it alone. 2 months later, the world had shifted in small but undeniable ways. Airlines across the country announced changes, some quietly, some proudly. Internal bias trainings were no longer optional. Discrimination reporting systems were upgraded. Corporate statements became fewer, but more intentional. And in the midst of all of it, Naomi chose not to chase the spotlight. She returned to her work at Ellison Neurotech. Her days were again filled with research meetings, project milestones, investor calls. But something had changed, not just around her, but within her. She no longer carried the invisible weight of staying quiet to make others feel safe. She no longer trimmed the edges of her brilliance. She no longer apologized with her presence. One morning, she boarded a flight from San Francisco to Atlanta. A short trip, a minor conference, no headlines, no cameras, just a woman in a navy blue blazer, carrying a black tote bag and a worn copy of James Baldwin's collected essays. As she approached her seat this time, she noticed the attendant glance up, then do a double take. Ms. Ellison. Naomi nodded. The attendant smiled, not nervously, but respectfully. Welcome aboard. Let me know if you need anything at all. Naomi thanked her and sat down. She pulled out her book, leaned her head back, and took a deep breath. Halfway through the flight, a young man from the economy cabin stopped near her row, pretending to stretch. Then he looked directly at her. Hey, I just wanted to say thank you for what you did. My mom's a nurse. She's had people ignore her for years. You made her feel seen. Naomi smiled. Tell her she's not invisible. None of us are. He nodded, his eyes misty, and returned to his seat. Later, as she sipped ginger tea, the captain made an announcement. Not about turbulence or altitude, but something rare. Ladies and gentlemen, we are honored to have Ms. Naomi Ellison aboard. Her courage reminded the world that justice can begin in the quietest places. Let us fly with integrity today and every day. A quiet applause broke out across the cabin. Not wild, just soft, reverent. Some passengers didn't clap. They just looked toward Naomi and nodded. She placed her hand over her heart, not out of pride, but out of humility, because this wasn't about her anymore. This was about all the people who had been told, in one way or another, that they did not belong. The mother asked to leave a store because of her headscarf. The teenager followed by security in a department store. The scientist who never got credit for her own research. The child told their voice was too loud, their dreams too big. This was for them. When the plane landed, Naomi was the last to exit. The flight crew waited at the door, each one shaking her hand. You changed the culture in here, said the lead attendant, not just the policy. Thank you. On the jet bridge, a child tugged at her mother's sleeve. That's her, the little girl whispered. That's the woman from the video. Naomi knelt gently to her level. What's your name, Ava? The girl whispered, suddenly shy. A beautiful name. Ava, promise me something. The child nodded. If someone ever tells you to move just because they're louder, don't. You hold your place. It belongs to you. Ava smiled, her curls bouncing as she nodded again. Promise. Naomi stood, waved goodbye, and continued into the terminal. Outside, Jasmine was waiting with the car. She handed Naomi a warm apple cider and raised an eyebrow. You good? Naomi sipped, then smiled. I'm whole. Back at the office, the team had organized a small surprise. Nothing elaborate, just a welcome banner, a dozen handwritten notes, and a new framed quote on the wall. She didn't make a scene. She made a standard. Naomi read each note. One from a young intern said, Because of you. I didn't stay silent when a senior manager cut me off in a meeting. Another read, You've made it easier for the rest of us to stay seated. In the days that followed, the SEAT project expanded to new industries. A hospital administrator reached out to pilot similar programs for waitlist discrimination. A tech conference pledged 50% representation from BIPOC professionals on all panels. A hospitality group revised their guest interaction policies. Naomi didn't attend every launch. She didn't need to. She had become the story, but she never wanted to be the center. She wanted to be the beginning. That evening, she returned home to find a letter in her mailbox. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. It read, "You didn't shout. You didn't threaten. You didn't run. You stayed. And because you stayed, we found our place too. Thank you. From one who used to move." Naomi read it twice, then placed it on her bookshelf next to the photo of her parents. Her father in his garden hat. Her mother holding a clipboard at a church meeting, commanding attention with quiet dignity. She sat down by the window. The sky was pink with dusk. A plane passed overhead, silver against lavender clouds. She thought back to that moment, the one that changed everything. Standing in the aisle of a plane, ticket in hand, being told to move, and choosing not to. Not out of defiance, but out of truth, out of love, out of the deepest belief that every human being deserves to sit in the seat they've earned without apology, without compromise, without fear. Her phone buzzed. A news alert. White House announces National Transportation Equity Commission. Naomi Ellison named chair. She smiled, not because of the title, but because finally, the conversation had reached the places that needed it most. She turned off the screen, closed her eyes, listened to the stillness, and in that stillness, she felt the truth resound. She had stayed seated, and because of that, the world had finally stood up. Naomi Ellison never raised her voice. She didn't scream. She didn't demand. She simply refused to be erased. And in that refusal, she reminded the world of a simple truth: justice doesn't always arrive with noise. It often begins in stillness. One seat, one woman, one moment. And yet, what we saw unfold wasn't just about Naomi. It was about all the unspoken moments millions have endured being overlooked, disrespected, displaced. This story calls us to reflect. How many times have we seen injustice and looked away? How often do we let comfort outweigh courage? Naomi chose differently. Her strength wasn't just in staying seated, it was in knowing she belonged there in the first place. And because she stayed, a new generation found their voice. A nation took notice, and an industry was forced to reckon with the truth. As you step away from this video, hold this with you every time you speak up. Every time you stand your ground with quiet dignity, you create space for others to do the same. Because the fight against discrimination doesn't always look like protest. Sometimes it looks like staying right where you are. If this story moved you, share it. If it made you think, talk about it. And if you believe in building a world where no one has to earn their humanity, then like, subscribe, and stay with us for the next story that needs to be heard. We're not done yet. Not even close.